There once was a psychologist named Maslow. He developed this hierarchy of needs. It's shaped as a pyramid. At the base of this pyramid is survival desires such as food, water, and shelter. This pyramid is rather rigid, and human behavior seems to mold to it nicely. But what if I told you that outside of this solid pyramid is an ever changing democracy of wants? Now, while people need water or some sort of liquid in order to survive, they want the smooth taste of Indaba coffee. Hello, world. My name is Data Mining Mike, and welcome to the Adventure Diver podcast, where we explore unique ideas, people, places, and events. On today's podcast, I had the pleasure of speaking with a remarkable individual named Bobby Enslow. Bobby is the founder of Indaba Coffee, which originated in Spokane, and he has since expanded into multiple locations throughout eastern Washington. He personifies local business leadership and serves as a pillar of the community. Indaba Coffee is more than just a coffee shop. It's an oasis of relaxation, warmth, and camaraderie. When you savor a cup of Indaba Coffee, it goes beyond just taste. You become part of a community that embraces leadership and togetherness. At the end of this podcast, I am highly confident that you will gain valuable insight that can be applied to your startup business or brand. Be sure to like, subscribe, and smash that bell for more data-driven updates. Bobby Enslow.
Hello, world.
How are you, man?
Doing good. Yeah.
So, tell the world about you. Tell the world about Bobby.
Well, I mean, not much to say. Not too much to say, but Spokane, Washington, here in the Northwest is where I grew up. Didn't really go too far away for college. Went down to Pullman and WSU and pursued kind of finance and business, and I just loved my experience there a lot, so I stayed there for another couple of years and got my MBA as well, and had a beautiful experience at WSU. Got to study abroad a little in Switzerland, got to do some internships in South Africa, and and so after that experience, I moved back to Spokane and spent a year just kind of living in the West Central neighborhood here and getting to know that neighborhood and the needs. And I was originally inspired to check out that neighborhood from a mentor of mine. Dave Wilkinson was like, hey, you should look into opening a business in this neighborhood, and specifically a coffee shop. And so I spent that year just kind of investigating, and doors just kept opening up, and it just felt like there was an opportunity and a need for a community space. And I wanted to do something, kind of wanted to give back and do something good for my hometown, here in Spokane, with my degree. And I was young and altruistic and ambitious and all those things, so maybe a little crazy, right? So so that was about 2008, 2009. I started Indaba Coffee, and and that's kind of when the Indaba Coffee journey began.
So would you got any pieces of advice for entrepreneurs trying to finance a business?
I bootstrapped it. So, I roped in a college buddy. We both threw in $5,000, and so we had literally this shoestring budget and this kind of dream and idea of like creating a community coffee shop, and so I didn't really. It's kind of the classic friends and family startup, and I found a landlord who was, they were actually passionate about the neighborhood as well, and they wanted to help us kind of get off the ground. And so partnering with them, and they essentially were kind of the, if you were like the VC or the seed money to get us going. Because I didn't even pull a paycheck for like 5 years, just really,
Yeah.
I think, young startups and entrepreneurs, I think they need to realize like, you're going to be in the trenches for a while in the beginning, unless you have some magic wand or something. But I think most businesses that are starting up, you're putting in a lot of sweat equity, right? So I think that's my advice, is like, just be prepared for that. I kind of joke with people who are entertaining the idea of starting a business, like, don't. But it's really the idea of like, make sure that you're mentally and physically prepared for the amount of time, energy, blood, sweat, tears that you're going to put into building your business and your brand. And second piece of advice is really like not being stubborn and listening to your customers. I think if you go into it, I think that was attributed to some of our success is, we went into it thinking, this is what the market needed, this is what's going to succeed and make it. But then quickly having to listen to the customers and listen to, what they're wanting, and making sure that that's added into the flavor, if you will, of what you're trying to create. I think there's still some wisdom in, kind of Steve Jobs would joke and say the customer doesn't know what they want. I think it's somewhere in the middle, right? I think there's an aspect of like, you want to listen to customer feedback, but then you still want to kind of surprise them with something new, hopefully, right? Like something bigger and better than maybe they even knew existed, right? And so, but if you're not listening to feedback, if you're not willing to pivot and adapt to your environment, I mean, the pandemic was a perfect example of like, you have to adapt to survive. And seeing fine dining restaurants adapting to takeout, like in fast food essentially, because that was, they wanted to survive, come out the other end. So they did what they needed to do. And so, we pivoted to mobile ordering and pickup and lots of that kind of stuff. And which was a little, and even, we have a couple drive-throughs now, and it's kind of almost opposed to our whole core value of creating a community space. And it's like, it's really difficult to do in a drive-through setting or in a takeout setting. Like, you have 2 seconds with the person, like face to face, so but understanding that we needed to pivot so that we could keep paying our bills and finding that balance. So young entrepreneurs, get ready for it. Get ready for it.
So you have expanded over the years. You feel that you've hit a point where it's hard to, how do I maintain that vision of a community space when I'm putting in a drive-through? But at the same time, you're staying competitive. I mean, Starbucks would argue the exact same thing too, that they're doing the exact same thing. So you're just mirroring the competition, and if you can do it better, right. You're doing a great job of trying to make Indaba the Starbucks of Spokane, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that we're, more, I would almost equate us more to like the Stumptown or the Intelli or Blue Bottle, hopefully, something a little bit more specialty. I feel like Starbucks has moved away from that to more of a fast food coffee experience. To the point where, we're even rethinking right now with the Monroe project, what is that customer experience actually, like how do we want to craft that customer experience, and do we want to maybe be a little more innovative? I mean, right now, it feels like everybody's switching to counter service, everybody's switching to mobile ordering, or even like self checkouts, right? Like, go to McDonald's now, it's like you're gonna wait an hour just to talk to a person to get your order in, even though there's no line, because they're running around doing other things. Or you just use your phone, or you use the little screens that they have set up, and it's like, are we missing something with that? And like, what kind of a impact is that having on our communities and our relationships and stuff? And even like, the relationship with your brand, right? Like, at that point, you're basically just turning yourself into a commodity, which in fast in the fast food world, maybe that makes sense, right? Like McDonald's is like, yeah, I just need my 20-piece chicken McNuggets so I can feed my kids and move along, you know, like. But I think when it comes to like our business being, you know, a lot more than just a cup of coffee, I would argue, like our business is community, our business is relationship building, our business is connecting people. And, you know, one of our core beliefs is radical hospitality will change the world. That's one of the things that we throw out there. And it's this idea that, you know, a stranger is going to come into your business and you're going to connect with them and in a way that they will remember for a lifetime. You know, people will remember the way that you make them feel. So we want people to feel blown away when they come in because they're seen and they're, you know, intentionally being connected to by the barista or even by people around them, because how can we craft a space that causes people to rub against each other's shoulders? And that's where mobile ordering kind of has hurt us a little bit, because there's a lot less of that cross-pollination of people, because people just pop in, they grab their thing, and then they're out. And yeah, so I've even heard of colleagues like actually pivoting back and actually removing mobile ordering from their business model. And that's kind of like, at first you're like, whoa, like, why would you do that? But that would be why, because you see that there's a value to your brand and value to your customer experience by almost kind of forcing them to come into your space and into your cafe, because the experience is going to be different. You're going to be engaging with people differently. You're going to be engaging with people around you. We kind of call those Indaba moments, when you have this serendipitous connection with a random person that's next to you in line, or maybe there's someone that you know that you haven't seen in a long time, or you know what I mean? And it's in those in between moments and those kind of coincidental moments where like magic kind of happens. And so we call those like kind of that Indaba magic. And so that's a lot of things that we're, as a leadership team right now, just like, you know, marinating over and just kind of ruminating, like, man, like, and even as a business owner, you know, and a finance guy, right? Like I look at and I love efficiency, you know, so yeah, if I see mobile ordering and I see the efficiency of that and I see all that, but I'm also a human being and I also assign value to those human interactions too, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the things that, man, we fast forwarded through Indaba, but I feel like a lot of people know our story from other podcasts and our website and things like that, but this kind of gives them an insight of what we're like thinking through right now in the present, of just like, man, like how are we crafting our future spaces to be maybe a little different or maybe more intentional in making sure people are connecting and creating community. So yeah.
Have you thought of Indaba vending machines?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the exact antithesis of what we were just talking about. But there was a shop in Seattle I went to that it was one person working and it was all robots. You know, all the robot arms making the lattes and even doing latte art. That's what's crazy, is like these robots are making better latte art than some baristas do.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, I was thinking more along the lines of, if people wanted their Indaba coffee and I started brainstorming, how are the other people doing it? Well, they either just sell their beans, mm-hmm. or I haven't seen anybody making fully automated drive-through corner barista that could be to satiate the morning craving for coffee. Mm-hmm. And if people want the real experience, they could come in. But then again, that's a whole nother world of research and development. That's just me brainstorming.
Well, there was, 10, 20 years ago, there was like people coming up with like coffee shops in boxes, and you know, the applications are airports, and so you could basically mm-hmm. be open 24 hours and you're making, you know, and that's where you get into, you know, especially when you're comparing specialty coffee or what people would call like third or fourth wave coffee versus like second wave coffee, is like, it is like about reconnecting with, you know, the earth and community and people. And like, so there's this kind of human cultural aspect to what you're quote unquote selling beyond just like caffeine. Like you're not You know what I mean? Like, we're not just selling something to caffeinate you. We're doing that, obviously, because that's a part of a lot of people's ritual, is to get a cup of coffee to kind of get going. But I think what, we want to make sure we don't lose is that we're building community. We're connecting people. And we're in a crazy time right now where for the first time in history, there's a poll that came out. There's less than 50% of the population that regularly attend church, or like call themselves church members, and you have people that the gym memberships are down. Like, there's a lot of these community things that are down, and so even though we live in an age with with amazing technologies that connect us more than we've ever been connected, we're actually, like, statistically less connected, which is this crazy phenomenon, right? So in a weird way, it almost creates a demand for what we're selling. If you say that we're selling community or connection and things like that, and it's like, well, then there's actually this kind of strange demand for that, which is also intriguing when you see restaurants pivoting as well to mobile ordering and self-kiosks and stuff, because restaurants are just like coffee shops, like places where people connect, right? Let's go have a meal and sit. But you go by your local McDonald's, how many people do you see inside versus in the drive-thru?
Yeah.
It's like, can you imagine if all those people in the drive-thru were forced to go inside, all the crazy dynamics and connections that would happen organically in that, all the variables that happen. Like, humans are this crazy, unique human beings, right? And you put them all in a room together, and, like,
yeah, that's how the
crazy things
starts.
happen. Like, we met at that networking event, right? And it's almost like now we have to program that into our lives, just like exercises has to be programmed. Whereas when we were cavemen, we just had to exercise because that's how you survive. So it's now like, well, now we have to build community, quote unquote, events in order to, like, exercise that part of our human nature, because I feel like it is very important. And studies have shown, like, people who are connected in deep relationships live longer, they're healthier, lower rates of cancer and heart disease, right? Like, so it's like, it is a part of, like, our actual vitality and thriving is human community and connection. So it's just this very strange time we live in.
Yeah, no, you brought up some good points that I've been really studying, which is how have you noticed how technology trains the user and what is becoming of that. And you notice how people, this is exactly why I moved this thing out of the way, because I realize I need to practice what I preach, is like, people will use a laptop or a cell phone as a social shield to not engage. And it's one of those things that I feel that I don't want to see the day where it is culturally taboo to just walk up and talk to a random person without them turning and saying, "Did you connect with me first through this app?"
Oh, I think there are people still like that, which is strange. Like, but I feel exactly what you're talking about, because I feel like, like, do people just? Is it okay for people to just talk to you randomly on the street anymore? Like, it's like, oh no, you can, here's my Instagram handle, you can ping me on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's restaurants I remember years ago when cell phones were on the rise and everything, there was, people trying to fight it by having the little baskets, in the restaurant, they would have, like, the cell phone basket, like, you're not allowed to touch your phone. And so I think people acknowledge it as an issue, but we still haven't, as a society or culture, figured out exactly how to navigate that balance. And I was born in '83, so I'm kind of on the edge. So I got to experience the whole, flip phone, big kitchen cord phone to flip phone to, ICQ Messenger to, Facebook so, like, the evolution of how we connected and chatted and communicated, and but I'm still very much in that trap of, like, I can easily get sucked into the vortex of swiping or whatever, and and stories and videos, and it's the endless loop. And then you're like 3 hours later, where did my life go? So yeah, how are we as a culture, and you know, in our small way, like we try to do that, you know, here at Indaba, because, you know, inherently our coffee, or quote unquote getting coffee with someone, is, so in some ways that's kind of a risk to our business too, if it becomes less common for people to like, hey, let's go get a coffee together and actually chat in real life, versus like, hey, let's just Zoom or whatever, and then they have their own, they're in the comfort of their own apartment, I guess, or whatever. So yeah, we live in an interesting time and dynamic right now, but I feel like, and it's almost like there's different camps. Like you'll have people that almost try to, because we're also dealing with it in work too, right? Like people want to telecommute, or you know, only work in person part of the time or whatever, and then you have those businesses that are almost trying to force people, like, well, no, you have to work 100% of the time in the office, on campus, kind of a thing. And then you see the pushback from that, right? And so I feel like there's got to be some sort of middle ground with that too. And obviously it varies by, you know, it varies by industry. Like you can't have a barista like working from home and make you coffee, I guess, unless he's like controlling an avatar robot.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, I guess he could. But I think, again, like it's like you want to go and see your morning barista, and you want to have that brief moment of human connection, and for them to remember something about you and what you did last weekend or whatever it is, you know, like there is something magical that comes from that. It was like being seen and felt, you know, being seen and known, and having that little connection. And we felt that even during the pandemic, when it was only drive-through, like having that brief, you know, interaction with people, like, here's your coffee, you know, we're fully masked up. At one point it was all curbside, right? So we're all like walking it out to the curb, but even just that moment of eye contact of like, hey, like we're making it, you know, we're still here, you know? So, yeah.
So yeah, you're definitely capitalizing and cultivating on that bounce back of that need for human demand, or like human connection that was robbed, or, you know, taken from people.
Yeah.
They didn't have.
Yeah. And I think it's strange because it's 2023. And, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be sitting on this board downtown that's part of like, how do we make downtown's Spokane a better place? Yeah. And, you know, like the business improvement district, so I get to go to these meetings and hear things that I've never heard before, but you know, we're still sitting at like a 40% back to work rate downtown, and so you literally have these giant office buildings that are only 40% occupied, and yet our sales numbers through the point of sale is up. So I was like, I can't even imagine what it would be like if it was fully populated downtown again.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, so that, if that's an insight of just the level of connectedness, but it's almost, I mean, almost their coffee shops have become offices for some people too, right? So you have a lot of people that live in Spokane that don't quote unquote work in Spokane. Like I just saw one of our old regulars, Nick, at the Broadway location, and he's just like, oh yeah, I, you know, moved away, became a software engineer, and I didn't like where I was living, and so I tried living in Portland for a little bit with family, and then I was like, I just miss Spokane, I love Spokane. So he literally doesn't even work in Spokane, but he lives in Spokane. So we are also living in a strange world, you know, where certain careers you can, software engineers, you know, whatever, customer service reps, or whatever, you know, like you don't necessarily need to live in Spokane. So it's a very interesting time right now, you know, and the pandemic obviously accelerated a lot of the video technology and remote work technology and all that kind of stuff. So, so yeah, the bounce back, like the garbage guys, they can't, I mean, they can't telecommute unless they create fully robotic, remote controlled garbage trucks. Maybe that would be, you can sit in the comfort of your gaming chair at home and you're controlling it. But I think it's interesting,
So that brings up a good point. You touched on Whitworth. So tell me about Whitworth University.
Sure.
And what do you do there?
So I've had the opportunity to be teaching a leadership class there for a few years, and that's been interesting because it's kind of reconnected me to a population and put me in a role that I've never really been in, and it's something that I always wanted to touch base and try, and it's almost a test to whether or not I wanted to make a career change or not, like if I wanted to go back and get my PhD or, teach. And so, but strangely enough, like teaching actually just relit the fire for Indaba and just what we could continue to develop and grow in as an organization when it comes to developing our leadership and developing our teams and all that. So I ended up actually stepping away this year, so I won't be teaching this fall, just to kind of refocus on the business and like the opportunities that we have to just continue to create better leaders within Indaba and the positive effect that that's going to have on. I mean, we just have a lot of crappy organizations in this world, a lot of crappy bosses, a lot of crappy leaders, and I'm not saying that we're perfect leaders, but I feel like we are one of those organizations that's striving to be better, our mantra is love people, love coffee.
Yeah.
So like, how are we striving to put people first when we're making decisions, that we're not quickly, that we're not just treating people as robots, because our people are incredibly valuable, to the success of the organization. And I think that has been that nurtured and created our culture over the last 14 years. Like there's been lots of ups and downs and ebbs and flows, but I feel like the trajectory has always been positive in the long term, and we're in a pretty dang good place where we have some really amazing leaders that are genuinely caring towards our staff and our teams in ways that honestly is probably beyond me than back when I was actively managing cafes and stuff. And I'm more in the role of training, equipping, mentoring, leadership, and then they're doing the same, right, and caring for their teams. And so that's been really exciting season for me to be in, and challenging season, as my role is, just the other day I was talking to somebody, I miss just being able to clock in, make coffee, and go home at the end of the day. But now there's just, some guy wants to do a podcast, I gotta go put my podcaster guy hat on, and some potential investor wants to meet with me. Okay, sure, I'll chat with you. Or a student from Gonzaga is doing a paper and they want to meet, and it's like, okay, sure, I'll meet and share my experience and stuff. But so it's a different season in my career with the business, but it's exciting too, and because I do get bored kind of easily, so it's been very good career for me to go from writing a business plan, coming up with a name and an idea and a brand, and then some core values, and then being a barista essentially for like 5-7 years straight, for 90% of my day, to roasting coffee, to now kind of leading leaders and training, equipping, and them to essentially run the business. So it's like, how can I get to the point where they're running the business and I can continue to just cast vision and build the business and grow the business and meet with potential people that continue to allow us to activate potentially more spaces. And really right now we're working on the Monroe project. We have that Indiegogo campaign. We're trying to raise money for our roaster, and so we're still dealing with those challenges. You know, every time we hit a capacity cap, and it's like, man, like to get to that next level, you know, there's challenges involved. And like, okay, do we bring on partners? Do we bring on debt? And the crowdfunding was a strategic decision because I really kind of wanted to be birthed from the community a little bit. Also, interest rates really suck right now. So even if I were to take out a loan, it's going to be 10 plus, you know, it's going to be double-digit percentage, you know, interest on it. So it's, you know, every season is a challenge. I mean, I literally started the business in 2008, 2009 in the middle of all the crazy fallout of the real estate. And, you know, so I survived the pandemic, and survived, you know, potentially another recession if Congress doesn't figure out what they're going to do. So, you know, so I think that's, you know, young entrepreneurs starting up, like you have to be ready to work, you have to be ready to pivot, you have to be ready to problem solve everyday problems that you never even thought existed. And so I think there's just a lot of elements of developing yourself as a whole person that's important, you know, physically, mentally, spiritually. Like if you're not in a good community with people and you're not taking care of yourself in those ways too, I think that's a really important part of leadership, is that you're not neglecting, you know, that aspect of it as well. Because when the crap hits the fan, you know, it ends up being on you as the you know, the leader. And one of your questions was, you know,
what is a leader to you?
What is a leader to me? I mean, a leader to me is someone who is not going to ask someone to do something they're not willing to do themselves. And I feel like that's been kind of my track record, is like I was a barista. I was the coffee roaster. I cleaned the toilets. I cleaned the floor sinks. I've done all the things. During the pandemic, when crap hit the fan, like I was in the shop every day making coffee for people because we're going to keep this thing going. I was also putting on the hat and being the cheerleader and saying, we're going to come out of this thriving. We're going to make it. You know, putting in the late hours of filling out government aid paperwork and doing all the things because, you know, you have 50 employees that are counting on you, you know, to be there. So not asking someone to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, you know, showing up, having that humility. You know, really it comes down to two core things, right? Like working your, you know, butt off and being humble about it. I think that's like the best leaders of all time are the ones that they're rolling up their sleeves, they're in there doing what needs to be done, leading the charge, leading the way, modeling the way. But they're not going around bragging about it. They're not going around tearing other people down either, right? Like I don't think those are people that people tend to gravitate towards. Like people don't gravitate towards people who are constantly talking about themselves, constantly, you know, but they will gravitate towards people they see are working their butt off and are genuinely caring about people, you know. So yeah, I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. So if people haven't heard of him, obviously, you know, look him up, watch all of his stuff. It's amazing.
I met him once.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that would be awesome to meet Simon, because I use a lot of his TED Talks and a lot of his videos in my leadership class too. And it's really pivoted. My mindset on business is so much different than what it was when I was in business school. You know, I think they give you very much a kind of corporate worldview. You're studying public, you know, Fortune 500 companies, because those are all public companies, so you have access to all that stuff. But you know, being a private company, like, you know, you don't have to necessarily answer to the stock market and your stock price. You can make different decisions. And there's a great book that I was introduced to called I want to say it was like Small Giants or something like that, but basically it was talking about those small businesses that are privately owned and to the product of the what, right? And Simon Sinek's like, bring it back to the why, right? Like let's bring it back to the why, because people buy why you do it, not what you do. And you're going to work harder when you are connected to the why.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, I mean, there's been so many times that I was going to just throw in the towel. Like, there's no reason why, you know, me with my quote unquote privilege and education, all this stuff, is living off of tips for, you know, 3 years or whatever, trying to quote unquote build this business in the poorest neighborhood in the state of Washington. What am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
But it's because I had this deeper why of like, no, like, I truly believe that what I was creating and building was giving back to the community and going to be a positive impact on what's going on in that neighborhood. And it continued to keep me going. And I'd have customers come in and reinforce that why, and they would, you know, there would be daily reminders that kind of reconnected me to that underlying why. And so even though I didn't have a list of core values, I did still have this deeper why of like, we're wanting to do good. But I think the hard lesson was not teasing that out a little bit further and then holding people accountable and bringing people, getting rid of people when it was clearly not in alignment with those values. So, but I do have that hard stop here.
Oh yeah.
2 minutes ago, but I appreciate you having me on the podcast, brother.
Absolutely, guys. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you?
I mean, honestly, our website, you know, it might look like we're a big company, but honestly, those forms go directly to my inbox. You know, like, so if you're wanting to get a hold of me, just jump on the website, fill out that form, it'll go right to my inbox, and I'll see it. I'm not in any particular shop. I am at Broadway pretty much every Monday through Friday to grab a cup of coffee on the way to wherever I'm going, whether it's meeting someone for a podcast or going out to the roastery or whatever it is. So if people ask me, like, what's your favorite location, that's, I mean, my favorite location, because I've spent the most hours there making coffee and getting coffee, and it's in my neighborhood, and my wife and I still live in that neighborhood, and we have our 3 kids and chickens, and we just got a new puppy, and so we're still very much, you know, engaged in that mission of like living, working, and playing in that neighborhood, and
Well, it's improved.
Mm-hmm. It's changed, yeah. It's changed a lot. So, and just a small part by us. I think it takes all of us, right? Like, you know, we can't do this alone. It takes, but sometimes we need to be there as an encouraging voice and a reminding voice of like, hey, like, it's on all of us to make this world a better place. And so that's what I do. That's where I'm at. Thanks again for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, Bobby Enslow. Check out Indaba.